They said I'd never fight back. They said I was too quiet, too mild, too willing to let life pass me by, without so much as a whisper. They said my silence was proof that I would never have the courage to stand up for myself. But they didn't see the quiet fire already growing in my chest, the calm that wasn't surrender, but resolve. It started like so many stories do not, with a crash of thunder, but with small stinging cuts. A careless word here, a dismissive smirk there. They called it harmless teasing, said it was just a bit of fun. But I felt the weight of their words each time, like invisible hands pushing me further down, daring me to speak up. I learned to keep my head down, to let their voices fill the room, to let them believe I had nothing of my own to say. At work, they thought of me as the easy one, the one who wouldn't argue, who would stay late to finish someone else's work without complaint. He won't mind, they'd say, stacking another impossible deadline on my shoulders. And I took it all in silence, my hands steady, even when my heart was screaming. I watched as they laughed, as they pushed and prodded, certain that I would never push back. And maybe for a time, they were right. At home, the quiet was different. There, the silence was my own, and in it, I started to hear the truth of my own voice. I replayed every slight, every smirk, every time they dismissed me, like I was nothing more than background noise. In that quiet, I realized they had mistaken my patience for weakness. They had mistaken my calm for an admission of defeat. But they didn't see the way those moments were forging something harder and stronger inside me. One afternoon, a co-worker leaned across my desk, his eyes glinting with amusement. "You're too soft," he said with a smirk. "You'll never make it here if you don't learn to fight." I looked up at him, my expression calm, and said nothing. But inside, something shifted. His words meant to break me, instead became the spark that lit the fire I'd been carrying for so long. I didn't tell anyone how I felt. I didn't let them see the way those words settled into my bones, growing roots that would not be torn out. I carried them quietly, like a secret promise to myself I would not let them decide who I was. I would not let them write the story of my life in the small spaces they had left me. They thought they knew me. They thought my silence was fear. But they didn't see the way I stayed late after everyone else had gone, how I pored over every detail, every report, determined to show not them, but myself what I was capable of. They didn't see the way I turned their dismissals into fuel, the way I let their doubt become my motivation. At night, I wrote in a small notebook I kept hidden in the back of my closet. Words I wasn't ready to speak out loud, truths I was still learning to claim. They think I'm nothing, I wrote, but they don't see what I'm becoming. And with every word, I felt the quiet fire in my chest grow brighter, hotter, unquenchable. The victories were small at first, finishing a project early, catching a mistake no one else had seen. But they mattered to me. They were proof that I was still here, still fighting, even if no one else noticed. In the mornings, I woke with that promise in my chest, I will rise. Quietly, but I will rise. I carried it like armor, a silent shield against their careless words. They still tried, of course. They still thought they could push me back into the shadows, keep me small and silent. But each time they tried, I stood a little taller. I didn't shout. I didn't meet them with the same weapons they used against me. But I didn't bend either. I refused to let their voices be the only ones that mattered. One day, after yet another, small slight, another joke at my expense, I caught my reflection in the mirror and saw something new. Strength. Not the loud, brash strength they had always valued, but a quiet, steady strength that could not be shaken by their doubt. I saw a man who had learned to carry the weight of their dismissals without letting it crush him. A man who was still here, still standing, still ready. That was the first blow, not theirs, but mine. The moment I realized that their words didn't have to define me. The moment I chose to let my silence be my strength, not my surrender. Because fighting back doesn't always look like raised voices or clenched fists. Sometimes it looks like refusing to let their doubts drown out the quiet certainty of your own heart. That night, I wrote in my notebook, my hand steady even as my heart pounded in my chest. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't see the fire in my silence. And as I closed the cover, I felt something settle into place inside me, a calm, quiet resolve that no one else could touch. Because I knew in that moment that they were wrong about me. They were wrong about what it meant to be strong, and I was done letting them tell me who I was. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't know me at all. And that was the beginning of everything. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of quiet, not the silence of defeat, but the calm of a storm gathering strength. I didn't raise my voice or meet their jabs with anger. I didn't fight back the way they expected me to. Instead, I let my actions speak for me. My resistance wasn't loud. It was measured and patient, built one deliberate choice at a time. In the mornings, I woke up early, the soft glow of dawn spilling across my room like a promise. I stood in front of the mirror, reminding myself that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of more than they believed. I refused to let their doubts shape the way I saw myself. I moved through the office with a quiet confidence, my steps steady, my eyes clear. I didn't let their whispers reach me. When they piled extra work on my desk, I didn't protest, but I didn't let it crush me either. I focused on each task with precision, finding satisfaction in the small victories they never bothered to notice. Every report I finished ahead of schedule, every error I caught before it turned into a problem, was a quiet defiance. They thought I was too soft, too willing to take what they gave me. But they didn't see the way I was growing stronger in the quiet spaces they left me. They didn't see the way I was reclaiming every small piece of ground they tried to take away. I stopped waiting for them to see my worth. I stopped waiting for them to offer me a place at the table. I started making my own place, building it out of the steady work I did and the quiet certainty in my chest. In the evenings, I stayed late, the office emptying out around me, until the only sound was the soft hum of the lights overhead. I let the silence steady me, let it become the foundation of the life I was building for myself. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their praise. My quiet resistance was for me alone. Some nights, the doubts still crept in, cold fingers wrapping around my throat. I would remember the way they laughed, the way they told me I would never make it. Those memories burned, but they didn't break me. I let them become the fuel for my fire, the push I needed to keep going, even when it would have been easier to let their voices drown out my own. At home, I wrote in my journal, each word a quiet rebellion against the narrative they had tried to force on me. They think I'll never fight back, I wrote. But every day, I show up, every day, I choose to keep going, is a fight they'll never see coming. I wrote about the way the office felt in the early mornings, the way the sun painted the windows gold, and made me feel like anything was possible. I wrote about the small ways I was taking back my life, one decision at a time. I didn't share these words with anyone. They were mine alone, a testament to the person I was becoming when no one else was watching. Slowly, I started to see the changes in the way people looked at me. The easy smiles turned wary. The quick dismissals slowed. They didn't know what to make of the quiet steadiness I carried with me now. They didn't know how to react to someone who wouldn't play by their rules anymore. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting where they tried to talk over me, I stood up and spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. "I've already handled this," I said, meeting their eyes one by one. "It's done." The room fell silent. They didn't know how to argue with someone who spoke with that kind of quiet certainty. In that moment, I saw something shift in their expressions, a flicker of respect, or maybe just the realization that I wasn't going to be ignored anymore. I carried that moment with me like a shield. It was a small victory, but it was mine, and it was proof that I didn't need to fight their way to win. I just needed to keep going, to keep building the life I wanted for myself, in the quiet spaces they overlooked. At night, I would stand by the window and watch the city lights flicker in the distance. I thought about all the ways I had let their words shape me, all the times I had made myself smaller to fit into the boxes they built for me. And I knew with a calm certainty that I was done living in those shadows. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't see the way I was learning to stand tall in the spaces they tried to keep me out of. They didn't see the way my silence had become my strength, the way my quiet had become my power. Each morning, I woke up and chose to keep going. Each night, I laid my head down, knowing that I was becoming someone I was proud to be, not because of them, but in spite of them. My quiet resistance was not for their eyes. It was for me, for the person I was becoming, the man who had learned to fight back without ever raising his voice. They thought I'd never fight back, but they didn't know me at all. And I was just getting started. The small victories were the ones that mattered most. They didn't come with applause or recognition. They came in the quiet moments when I looked at the work I had done and felt the steady pulse of pride in my chest. In those moments, I knew I was building something they could never take away from me. Each day, I found small ways to push back against the weight of their doubt. I didn't argue with them. I didn't waste my breath trying to prove what I knew in my bones. I let my actions speak for me, each one a small defiance against the voices that said I would never be enough. I stopped waiting for someone to give me permission to take up space. I stopped waiting for someone to tell me I deserved to be there. I claimed my place quietly, in the steady way I carried out every task, in the calm certainty of my gaze when they tried to talk over me. They noticed even if they didn't want to admit it. I saw it in the way their eyes flickered when I spoke, in the way their laughter faltered when I didn't join in. They didn't know what to make of me anymore, and that was fine. I wasn't here for them. I was here for me. One morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. The light was soft and clean, the quiet of the early hour wrapping around me like a promise. I sat at my desk and let myself feel the satisfaction of that moment. No one else was there to see it, but I saw it. And that was enough. I started taking on projects that scared me, the ones they had always said were too much for me. I let the challenge of them sharpen my focus, let the quiet hours spent working alone become my training ground. Each small success built on the one before it until I could feel the strength of them in my bones. At night, I wrote about it all in my journal, not in grand sweeping statements, but in the small honest truths that only I needed to see. They said I'd never fight back, I wrote. But every day I choose to keep going is a fight they'll never understand. Some days were harder than others. There were moments when their laughter still stung, when the weight of their dismissals pressed against my chest like a stone. But I didn't let it crush me. I let it become the grit beneath my resolve, the quiet reminder that their voices didn't have to be the loudest. One afternoon, I caught a mistake in a report that no one else had seen. It wasn't a big thing, but it would have caused problems down the line. I fixed it without fanfare, but when the project went smoothly, I saw the way my boss looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. I saw it in his eyes, and that was enough. I started to see those small shifts everywhere. In the way people hesitated before they dismissed my suggestions, in the way they looked at me when I spoke. I didn't need their approval to know I was doing something right. The proof was in the way I felt at the end of the day, tired but steady, satisfied in a way I had never known before. At home, I would sit in the quiet and let myself feel it. The small victories weren't about them. They were about me, about the way I was learning to stand on my own, to believe in my own worth, even when no one else would say it out loud. Each small victory was a brick in the foundation. I was building a quiet testament to the man I was becoming. They didn't see the way I woke up each morning with that promise in my chest, I will rise. Quietly, but I will rise. They didn't see the way I whispered it to myself, in the moments when their doubt felt like a weight I couldn't lift. But I saw it, and that was enough. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I caught my reflection in the glass door. I saw the man I was becoming there, the calm in my eyes, the steady line of my shoulders. I saw someone who had learned to turn silence into strength, who had learned that fighting back doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like refusing to be small. I wrote it down that night, the words soft but certain. I am not what they said I was. I am more. And in that simple truth, I felt the weight of their doubts fall away. Because they said I'd never fight back. But they didn't see the way each small victory was shaping me into someone stronger than they could ever imagine. They didn't see the way my quiet had become my power, the way my silence had become the foundation of everything I was building. Each day, I woke up and chose to keep going. Each night, I laid my head down, knowing that I was still here, still fighting, still rising. The small victories were mine alone, and they were enough. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't know me at all, and I was just getting started. The challenge came quietly at first, like a whisper in the dark. It wasn't a sudden confrontation or an open accusation. It was the subtle way they shifted their expectations, the way they started to test the edges of the quiet power I had built. They still didn't believe I would fight back, but they were starting to wonder. I could see it in the way they watched me now, in the way their voices tightened just a little when I entered the room. They were used to having the last word, to seeing me bend under the weight of their doubt. But I had stopped bending, and they didn't know how to handle that. The real test came when they gave me a project no one else wanted. Something big, something messy, something they were sure would bury me. "Let him take it," one of them said with a shrug. "He probably won't say no anyway." And he was right, I didn't say no. I took it, but not because I wanted to prove anything to them. I took it because I wanted to prove it to myself. I wanted to see if I could do it, if the quiet strength I had been building was enough to carry me through. The project was bigger than anything I had handled before. Deadlines loomed like dark clouds, and every time I looked at the mountain of work in front of me, I felt the old whispers of doubt stirring in the back of my mind. But I didn't let them take hold. I woke up early every morning, the sun still just a promise on the horizon. I let the quiet of those early hours steady me, let it remind me that I had already faced so much worse. The work was hard, every piece of it demanding my full attention, my full heart. But I gave it everything I had. I stayed late long after everyone else had gone home, the office lit only by the glow of my computer screen. The silence was my ally, the quiet space where I could hear my own thoughts without the weight of their doubt pressing in. Each night, I wrote in my journal the words, a quiet map of my progress. "They think I'll fail," I wrote, "but I will not let their voices decide who I am." Some nights, exhaustion pressed against my shoulders, like a weight I could barely carry. I would close my eyes and hear their laughter, their easy dismissal of everything I was working for. But then I would open my eyes again and remember why I was doing this. Not for them. Never for them. For me. Because I was done letting them write the story of my life. The project moved forward slowly, at first each small victory hard won. But with every piece I completed, with every problem I solved, I felt the quiet fire in my chest burn a little brighter. I saw the shape of my own strength taking form in the steady rhythm of my work. They started to notice. Not all at once, but in small ways. A nod from my boss when I explained a solution they hadn't thought of. A moment of quiet when I walked into a meeting, as if they were finally seeing me for the first time. But I didn't let those moments distract me. I kept my head down, kept my focus on the work in front of me. Because I knew the real victory wasn't in their recognition. It was in the way I was proving to myself that I was more than they had ever believed. The challenge wasn't just the project they had given me. It was the quiet battle I was fighting every day against the voice in my head that still sometimes wondered if they were right. Each time I silenced that voice, each time I chose to keep going, I claimed another piece of the man I was becoming. One night, after another long day, I stood at the window and let the city lights wash over me. I thought about all the times I had let their doubt shape the way I saw myself. And I knew with a calm certainty that I was done with that. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't see the way each challenge they gave me was another chance to rise. They didn't see the way I was turning their tests into my own triumphs. The project neared completion, and I could see the shift in their eyes, the quiet respect that hadn't been there before. But it wasn't about them. It was never about them. It was about the way I had learned to stand tall in the face of their doubt, the way I had turned the quiet spaces they gave me into the foundation of my own strength. At night, I wrote in my journal, my hand steady, even when my body was tired. "This is my fight," I wrote. Not with them, but with the voice that says I can't. And every day, I am winning. They thought they could bury me in this challenge, that I would crumble under the weight of it. But they didn't know that I had already learned how to rise. Because fighting back doesn't always mean meeting their anger with anger. Sometimes it means meeting their doubt with the quiet certainty of your own worth. They didn't see that, but I did. And that was all that mattered. The turning point didn't come in a blaze of glory or with some triumphant speech. It came quietly, the way most important things do. It was in the way I felt when I woke up each morning, no longer dreading the day ahead, but stepping into it with a calm determination. It was in the way I moved through the office, no longer shrinking under the weight of their doubt, but standing tall, my shoulders straight, and my head held high. I didn't need to announce it. I didn't need to shout it from the rooftops. I just needed to live it, to let my actions speak the words I had carried in my heart for so long. Each day was a small act of defiance, a quiet promise to myself that I would not be who they said I was. The project they gave me was finished now, and it was good, better than they had expected, better than even I had thought possible. I saw it in the way they looked at me when I handed it in the way their voices softened when they spoke to me. They didn't say it out loud, but I didn't need them to. I saw it in their eyes, and that was enough. The real victory wasn't in their approval. It was in the way I had learned to trust myself, to believe in my own worth, even when no one else did. That was the turning point when I realized that I didn't need them to tell me I was enough. I had already found that answer for myself. At home, I sat by the window and let the quiet of the evening wrap around me like a blanket. I wrote in my journal the words soft but steady. They said I'd never fight back. But every day I rise is a fight they can't see, and every quiet victory is mine alone. I thought about all the times I had stayed silent, all the times I had let their voices drown out my own, and I knew with a calm certainty that I was done with that. I wouldn't let their doubt decide the shape of my life anymore. I was done playing the part they had written for me. At work, I took on new challenges, not because I wanted to prove anything to them, but because I wanted to prove it to myself. I wanted to see how far I could go when I stopped letting their doubts hold me back. And with every challenge, I found another piece of the man I was becoming. They started to see it too. Not in some grand revelation, but in the small ways their voices softened, in the way their eyes lingered a little longer when I spoke. They didn't know how to react to the quiet strength I carried now. They didn't know how to argue with someone who didn't need their approval anymore. And I didn't give them the chance. I kept my head down, kept my focus on the work in front of me, because that was where I found my strength, in the quiet spaces they overlooked, in the calm resolve that had become the foundation of everything I was building. At night, I would stand in front of the mirror and see the man I was becoming, not loud or brash, but steady and sure. A man who had learned that fighting back doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it means refusing to be small. Sometimes it means choosing to rise in the quiet, no matter how many times they try to push you down. One afternoon, after another long day, I sat in the break room, the quiet hum of the vending machine the only sound. One of them walked in, someone who had once dismissed me with a wave of his hand. He looked at me for a long moment, then sat down across from me. "You've changed," he said finally, his voice quiet. I met his eyes, calm and steady. "No," I said. "I just stopped hiding who I am." He didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded and looked away, and in that small moment, I felt the weight of his doubt slip away like a shadow in the light. At home, I wrote it in my journal. The turning point isn't when they see you, it's when you see yourself and know that's enough. And I knew in the deepest part of me that it was true. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't see the way each quiet step forward was a battle, when the way each calm breath was a promise to myself that I would not be defined by their voices. I was done living in the shadow of their doubt. I was done letting them decide the shape of my life. The turning point wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and sure. And it was mine. Because they said I'd never fight back. But they didn't know me at all. And I was just getting started. The showdown wasn't what they expected. They thought it would be loud, explosive, maybe even violent. They thought if I ever found my voice, it would come out in a storm of anger, in the kind of fury they'd always used to keep me in my place. But that wasn't my way. My way was quiet, patient, built in the small hours of the morning, and the silent nights when no one else was watching. My way was steady, a slow rising tide. They hadn't even noticed until it was already too late. The day of the showdown came without fanfare. It was just another meeting, another chance for them to dismiss my work, to push me back into the shadows. But I didn't let them. I sat there calm and steady, my hands folded neatly in front of me, my voice quiet but clear. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to speak my truth. When they tried to talk over me, I waited. When they tried to belittle my work, I let the facts stand for themselves. And slowly, I saw it in their eyes, the realization that I wasn't the same man they had once thought I was. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I wasn't playing by their rules. I was playing by mine. Each question they asked, each challenge they threw at me, I met with a calm certainty they couldn't shake. They didn't know how to argue with someone who wouldn't be rattled, someone who didn't need to raise his voice to stand his ground. The room grew quiet, their bluster fading like smoke in the wind. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, sure and steady, letting them see the man I had become. And in that quiet, I saw something shift in their eyes. They still tried, of course. Old habits die hard. But their voices were softer now, their questions less certain. Because they knew. They knew they couldn't break me anymore. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk, my head held high. I felt the quiet satisfaction of a battle fought and won, not with anger, but with resolve. And that was the real victory. At home that night, I sat by the window and let the city lights wash over me. I wrote in my journal the words steady and sure. The showdown wasn't about them. It was about me, about knowing who I am and not letting anyone take that away. Some nights, I still felt the echoes of their voices in my head, the way they had tried to make me doubt everything I was. But those voices didn't have power over me anymore. I had learned to let them pass through me, like wind through the trees, leaving me standing just as tall. I started to see the way my quiet strength was changing things around me. People who had once looked past me started to pause when I spoke. People who had once laughed behind my back started to ask for my thoughts, my help. And each time I gave it freely, not because I needed their praise, but because I knew the power of sharing what I had learned in the quiet. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't see that fighting back didn't mean meeting force with force. It meant refusing to let their doubt decide who I could be. It meant standing in the calm center of the storm and knowing that I was enough. One day, as I was leaving work, one of them stopped me. His voice was careful, his eyes searching. "You're not the same," he said. I met his gaze calmly. "No," I said. "I'm not." And I walked away, my steps light, my heart steady. At night, I wrote it in my journal, again the words, a quiet vow: I will not be who they said I was. I will be who I choose to be. And with each word, I felt the weight of their doubt slip away. The showdown wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet. And in that quiet, I found the power they had never seen in me. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't know me at all. And I was just getting started. The collapse didn't come all at once. It came in small fractures, the quiet unraveling of the power they had once held so tightly over me. It came in the way their voices lost their edge, in the way their laughter turned nervous when I entered the room. They thought I wouldn't notice, but I saw it all. I saw the way their confidence faltered, the way their eyes darted away, when I spoke with the calm certainty they could no longer shake. They had spent so long telling me who I was, so long trying to fit me into the box they had built for me. But I had outgrown it, and they didn't know what to do with the man who wouldn't bend to their will anymore. At first, they tried to pretend nothing had changed. They tried to act as if their words still had power over me, as if their laughter still stung the way it once had. But it didn't. I had learned to let their voices pass over me, like wind, nothing more than noise, in the quiet strength I had found within myself. Slowly, I watched the collapse of their certainty. Each time I stood my ground, each time I met their doubt, with my calm resolve, I saw another piece of their power slip away. They didn't know how to fight someone who wouldn't fight back the way they expected. They didn't know how to handle the man who didn't need their validation to know his own worth. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right, about knowing that I was enough, even when they said I wasn't. Each day, I walked into the office with the quiet confidence of a man who had learned to stand on his own. And with each step, I felt the weight of their expectations fall away. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't see the way I was rebuilding myself from the inside out, stronger and steadier than they could ever imagine. One afternoon, I watched as one of them stumbled over his own words in a meeting. He looked at me, his eyes unsure, and I met his gaze calmly. I didn't need to say anything. He knew. They all knew. The collapse of their certainty wasn't something I celebrated. It wasn't a victory I needed to claim. It was just the natural consequence of the truth I had been living in the quiet all along. I didn't need to raise my voice or call them out. I just needed to keep being who I was, to let the strength I had built speak for itself. At night, I wrote it in my journal, the words soft but certain. They said I'd never fight back. But I didn't need to fight their way. I just needed to keep going. Some nights, I still felt the weight of their doubt pressing against my chest. But it was lighter now, easier to carry. Because I knew that weight wasn't mine to hold anymore. It belonged to them. I watched as their walls cracked, as the foundation of their power began to crumble under the quiet strength they had never seen in me. And I didn't need to push. I didn't need to tear it down. All I needed to do was keep standing. The collapse was theirs to face, not mine. I had already walked through the fire and come out the other side. One evening, as I was leaving work, one of them stopped me at the door. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic. I didn't know, he said. I looked at him, my gaze calm and steady. You didn't want to, I said. And I walked away, the weight of his words falling away behind me. At home, I wrote it down again. The collapse isn't mine to control. It's theirs to face. My strength isn't built on their weakness. It's built on my choice to keep going. Each day, I woke up with that promise in my chest: I will rise. Quietly, but I will rise. And in that promise, I found the freedom they could never take from me. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't know me at all. And I was just getting started. The acknowledgement didn't come in the form of an apology. It didn't come in some grand gesture or a public admission of everything they had done to keep me small. It came in the quiet spaces, in the soft looks, and the words they didn't say. It came in the way they paused when I entered the room, in the way their voices softened when they spoke to me now. They thought I didn't notice, but I did. I saw the way their eyes shifted when I walked by, the way their shoulders hunched just a little, as if they were bracing for the truth they had spent so long trying to deny. I didn't need them to say the words. I didn't need them to tell me they had been wrong about me. Their silence was enough. It was a different kind of silence now, not the dismissive quiet of someone who didn't think I mattered, but the heavy quiet of someone who knew they had misjudged me. At work, they started to come to me for help. The same people who had once pushed me aside now came to my desk with questions, with problems they couldn't solve. And I helped them, not because I needed their praise or their gratitude, but because I knew who I was. I didn't need to prove it to anyone else anymore. Each time I helped them, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a calm knowledge that I had become the man I had always wanted to be. Not loud or demanding, but steady and sure. Some of them tried to apologize in small ways: an extra cup of coffee left on my desk, a quiet word in the hallway. But I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their words to know that I had won a battle they didn't even see coming. The real acknowledgement wasn't in what they said. It was in the way I no longer needed them to say it. One morning, I caught my reflection in the glass as I passed by a window. I saw the calm in my eyes, the quiet strength in the set of my shoulders. I saw a man who had learned to stand tall even when no one was watching. And I knew with a certainty that went deeper than any words that I was done living in the shadow of their doubt. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't see the way I had been fighting all along, not with anger, but with resolve. Not with noise, but with quiet certainty. At home, I wrote it in my journal. They said I'd never fight back. But I never needed to fight their way. My strength was never built for them to see. The acknowledgement wasn't for them. It was for me. It was in the way I moved through my days, now no longer weighed down by the need to prove myself to people who had never really seen me. It was in the way I woke up each morning with a calm promise in my chest: I will rise. Quietly, but I will rise. And in that promise, I found a freedom they could never take from me. They started to see it too, in the small ways, in the quiet shifts that said more than any words ever could. They saw the way I didn't flinch anymore, the way I didn't shrink back when they tried to push me down. They saw the way I met their eyes and didn't look away. And in those moments, I saw something in their gaze I had never seen before: respect. It wasn't loud or obvious. It wasn't something they would ever say out loud. But it was there in the way they moved around me now, in the way they listened when I spoke. The acknowledgement was never about them. It was about me. About knowing that I didn't need their permission to be who I was. About knowing that their doubts had never been about me at all. They had always been about their own fear of what they couldn't understand. At night, I wrote it in my journal, the words soft but unshakable: I will not let their silence decide the shape of my life. I will not let their doubt become my truth. I will rise. And with every word, I felt the weight of their voices slip away. The acknowledgement wasn't something they could give me. It was something I claimed for myself in the quiet spaces of my own resolve. They said I'd never fight back. But they didn't know me at all, and I was just getting started. The final word was never spoken out loud. It didn't come in a meeting, or a conversation, or a quiet apology. It came in the calm certainty of my steps, in the way I moved through my life without hesitation. It was written in the steady beat of my heart, in the way I woke up each morning with a purpose that no one else could define. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't see that the real fight was never against them. It was against the small voice inside me that wondered if they were right, the voice that had once tried to convince me I was only as good as their opinion. But that voice was gone now, replaced by something stronger, something steadier, a quiet confidence that didn't need to shout to be heard. At work, I took on new challenges without waiting for permission. I didn't flinch when they looked at me with questions in their eyes. I met their gaze calmly, my voice steady when I spoke. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The proof was in the work I did, in the quiet victories that had built me from the inside out. One afternoon, I sat in a meeting and listened as they tried to find the words they had always kept from me. Their voices were softer now, their questions more careful. I didn't meet them with anger or pride. I just let the calm in my chest speak for itself, because I knew who I was, and I didn't need their acknowledgement to know my worth. At night, I wrote it in my journal: the final word is mine. Not because I took it from them, but because I stopped letting them speak for me. Some days, I still thought about the way they had tried to keep me small. I remembered the laughter, the dismissive words, the way they had pushed me aside without a second thought. But those memories didn't have power over me anymore. They were just echoes of a past that no longer had a hold on my heart. The real final word was in the quiet way I chose to live each day. In the steady steps I took, in the calm breath I drew every morning when I woke up and remembered who I was. It was in the way I refused to let their doubt shape my story. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't see that fighting back didn't mean meeting force with force. It meant refusing to let their voices be the only ones that mattered. It meant choosing every single day to stand tall, even when no one was watching. They saw it now in the way I moved through the world. They saw it in the quiet way I spoke, in the calm certainty of my eyes. They saw it in the way I didn't need their approval to keep going. The final word was never about them. It was about me. About knowing that I had built something strong and unbreakable inside myself, something they could never touch. One evening, as the sun set over the city, I stood at my window and watched the light turn the sky to gold. I thought about everything I had been through, every quiet battle I had fought to be here. And I knew in the deepest part of my soul that I was proud of the man I had become. Not because of them, in spite of them. At home, I wrote the final words in my journal. They said I'd never fight back, but they didn't know me at all. And now, they're begging for peace. And I closed the journal with a quiet smile, feeling the weight of those words settle into the calm of my heart. The final word wasn't a victory or a declaration. It was a promise to myself, to the man I had become. A promise that I would keep moving forward no matter what they said. Because they said I'd never fight back. But I did. And in the quiet strength I carried now, I knew I was just getting started.